Episode 169 of the Interpretation Station is called to order. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. How are you all doing on today, the 18th of March 2023? Hope you've recovered from your St. Patrick's Day hangovers, if any of you have had any of those. Today's episode, actually the next three episodes, are going to be focusing on, you may, if you're long-time fans of the Interpretation Station, you may have noticed that from time to time I do a sort of self-evaluation of my own work. I have found a big meeting recently that was held in New York. So this was maintenance of peace and security of Ukraine. I think it was the last big meeting on the subject, at least the big. I think there was maybe even one last week, but the transcript isn't out yet. So this is one from the 24th of February, and it's to mark the 1-year anniversary of the conflict. And what I'm going to do is take you through basically how I would practice doing something like this. So I'm going to give myself a bit of prep work. I'm going to read through. What happens is the meeting starts with basically Guterres, the Secretary General, gives a statement, sort of taking stock of the situation. So I'm going to read through that, looking for key vocab. Okay, so this is one of the tricks when you're interpreting. Okay, it's plagiarizing basically. You're looking to steal useful vocab from previous speakers. Okay. I'm going to look at what he says. I'm going to look at then there's Dmitry Kuleba, the Ukrainian foreign minister, who is going to speak. And then I'm also going to look, so he's going to speak, and then I'm also going to look through the statement by China. So that's going to give me like a good overview of how things stood on the 24th of February from the neutral side, shall we say, Guterres, the Ukrainian side, Ukraine, obviously, and the more pro-Russia side from China. And then I'm going to get into it. And so the first statement I'll do for this episode is a statement by Ecuador, and then I'm going to do for the next episode I'll do Russia. Well, I'll do Russia and France, I think, for those. But today's episode's on Ecuador, their statement about the situation in Ukraine. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to share the screen with you now. See, this is the transcript from the meeting. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through, so it actually starts with the Russian ambassador. If you've got 4 hours to spare, you can watch the whole thing. Nebenzia has a few points of order to make at the start before they actually move to the presentation before they actually adopt the agenda and move on to the presentation by the SG. So yes, here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this statement here from this SG, and I'm going to, as I go along, note down important vocab. Then I'm going to read Kuleba here. He speaks next, Ukrainian foreign minister. And then just to give me the other side, I'm going to go down and find the Chinese statement. I'm going to take some vocab from there. And then with that vocab noted down, hopefully that's going to give me all the ammunition I need to do the Ecuadorian statement today. So yes, let's have a look then at what the SG had to say. So also, it's always worth noting because it's the 9,269th meeting of the Security Council. And the president, take note, okay? President is, well, we don't know if it's Mr. Borg or Mrs. Fraser. Let's say it's Mr. Borg. Because obviously the speakers may refer in person. I didn't even know Malta were on the Security Council. There you go. So those are two just very good basic things to be aware of. These things could easily come up. You see conflict-related sexual violence, violations of international humanitarian law, human rights law, enforced disappearance and arbitrary detention, Those are sort of classic things, if you like, that could appear in a statement on a subject like this. Okay, numbers, like you want to pick these numbers, for example, okay. 17.6 million require humanitarian assistance. More useful figures here: 8 million refugees, 5.4 IDPs. An expression like that, devastating impact, you're going to get probably lots of references to the devastating impact. Good collocation, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm not certain what that is in my other languages, but I can probably recognize it coming into English. Interesting expression: explosive weapons with wide area effects. Maybe I'll note that down. This is another classic expression: unimpeded humanitarian access. This could be important. Okay, the nuclear, with respect to the nuclear aspect, 15 operating reactors in Ukraine. Zaporizhia. Okay, just take note of that. That's how that's the Ukrainian pronunciation. So when I'm going to be speaking for Ecuador, I want to try and make sure I call it Zaporizhia. Russians call it Zaporozhia. I'm more used to calling it Zaporozhia because that's how it's always been called up to now. But under these circumstances, you want to be leaning towards the Ukrainian versions of the names. Okay, the Black Sea Grain Initiative. That's very important bit of vocab to have down. Again, important figure, 20 million metric tons of foodstuffs safely reconnected to global supply chains. Again, this sort of slightly technical vocabulary could be quoted. Having food reconnected, put back into supply chains. It's always good to be familiar with the jargon that is used for these sort of technicalities. Fertilizer exports, including ammonia. This General Assembly resolution could be important. ES 11.6. Okay, so that's Guterres. Let's see Kuleba, what he talks about. So he mentions this resolution 11.6. 141 states voted in favor. Okay, Zelensky's 10-point plan. Again, Black Sea Grain Initiative. State-sponsored kidnapping of children. That is an issue that I know has been sort of bandied about recently, so that might be worth just writing down. Interesting. I like that expression, complicity in the trampling of the charter. Special tribunal with specific jurisdiction. Okay, so that was Kuleba. So I'm going to look at the Chinese one now. It's the kind of thing the Russians would talk about, the observation of universally recognized international law and the basic norms governing international relations. I'm not going to note it down because I'm pretty familiar with that sort of vocab, but I'm just saying that is a typical thing that the Russians would also talk about. Similarly, blatantly interfering in other countries' internal affairs, undermining sovereignty and territorial integrity. These are sort of classics. Again, one country's security should not be pursued at the expense of another's. Again, the Russians talk about that all the time in the context of other matters of international security around the world. Obviously, because it's going to be Ecuador speaking, I think the Ecuadorians are more aligned with Ukraine, so they're more likely to use the terminology perhaps that the Ukrainians talked about, but still. This could be an important convention. Okay, the Convention on Nuclear Safety. Again, here, adhere in earnest to the principles of neutrality and impartiality, avoid politicization. Again, sort of thing the Russians would say. And again, Black Sea Grain Initiative is being cited. Fertilizer exports. Again, it's also used when you look at the different statements and you see which of those expressions are being repeated in each one of them. That again gives you an idea of what the key issues are. Okay, so I think we're now sufficiently armed with vocab, with figures, with vocab, with the names of mechanisms and initiatives to now. I think we can now go in and do the statement and doing Ecuador. And so I'm going to do it now, and I'll see you at the other end, and then we can audit my work, okay? Okay then, so let's see how I did. By the way, before we start my breakdown, I should just advise you, as usual, links to the video, to the transcript are all in the description box. I very much suggest that you give the statement a try yourselves. Have a look at for your warm-up the same text that I was looking at, the introductory stuff by the SG, by Kuleba, and by the Chinese. Take your notes and then give it a shot, give the statement a try, and then come and break your own work down together with me. Now, I must confess, I got a nasty shock in the very first sentence. I'm being completely open here. Cards on the table, right? Maybe I didn't have the sound up quite high enough. But when he first talked about here, los primeros this bit here, los primeros bombardeos que se iniciaron mientras el Consejo de Seguridad se reunía en este mismo salón pulverizaron los esfuerzos. I missed that bit, and I was like, shit, I didn't catch that, and so I had to restart. So I must admit, I did slightly cheat. That was my one little bit of cheating, so I just started again, and it did make sense to me the second time I heard it. But, so anyway, you'll have seen that the speaker, very clear, very well-spoken, speak quite quickly, but certainly what I mean, that's pretty good quality generally. Pretty much to the point, prepared speech, some dense stuff, but a pretty good speaker. So that's a good one to practice, I would actually say. That's a really good, solid one to practice, okay? Lots of very topical vocabulary, both related to the conflict itself and related to UN issues, UN documents as a whole. So it's a really good one to practice, okay? So I'll just play my effort, sort of sentence by sentence, and just assess what I should have said, okay? So here we go. Okay, so here we go.
Exteriores y movilidad humana del Ecuador.
Gracias, señor presidente, por convocar a este debate cuando se cumple un año de la agresión militar sobre Ucrania.
Okay, just a couple of things. I said for here, to convene, to summon. That was a good standard set of synonyms for that idea, for convening or for summoning a debate. I sort of adapted this to make it sound more English, I think, with the first to mark the first anniversary of the military aggression against Ukraine, rather than just going word by word processing the Spanish, which would have been can summon this debate when the military aggression against Ukraine turns 1 year old. That wouldn't sound right in English. So those little moments where you just want to step back a second and just think, what would you say to a friend? You know, what would you say in English? We would say that, right? To mark the first year of the military aggression.
Los primeros bombardeos que iniciaron mientras este consejo se reunía en esta misma sala pulverizaron los esfuerzos diplomáticos de la comunidad internacional y el clamor del secretario general Antonio Guterres, que pedía a la Federación de Rusia que le diera a la paz una oportunidad.
Russia
Hoy me enfocaré en tres puntos.
Okay, so again, I was a bit, having had that first attempt, which gave me a rather nasty shock. I was a bit wary going into the sentence the second time round. But so anyway, yeah, I think I more or less got it. Okay, I said, the first bombardments, which started as this council met in this same chamber. You almost just said chamber, not a room. Okay, it's a grand chamber. Pulverized the diplomat. So I just went with the pulverized diplomatic efforts of the international community. Y el clamor del secretario general. So I said for the el clamor, the call. Sounds a bit weird to me. I mean, they pulverized the call of the Secretary General, but I mean, yeah, it's okay. I think I skipped Guterres' name. I just decided that because I was a bit worried about that whole sentence, I thought, we don't need to give. Everyone knows who the SG is. Okay, so I just tactically took a decision to drop his name, who called on the Russian Federation to give peace a chance. Okay, John Lennon and all that. I gave them the Russian Federation. Maybe I could have just said Russia, but I thought the whole issue of names of countries these days, as you can imagine, is quite sensitive. So I just gave it the full name there.
Puntos centrales. Primero, las graves consecuencias humanitarias y globales de esta guerra. Segundo,
okay, just notice what I did there. So I said the grave humanitarian consequences. I didn't wait for the globales, right? Because it's actually both those two adjectives, humanitarias and globales, refer to the consequences. So what I did was that's a technique that you just repeat. You just repeat the noun. So I said the grave humanitarian consequences and global consequences of this war. That's an important little trick to be able to pull off and not make it look as though you're correcting yourself. You wouldn't want to say the grave humanitarian consequences. I mean, the grave humanitarian and global consequences. That wouldn't sound good.
Lo que este Consejo y las Naciones Unidas han podido hacer, y tercero, lo que hace falta para el restablecimiento de la paz y la seguridad. Señor Presidente,
okay, that's fairly straightforward. The restablecimiento de la paz, restore peace, reestablish peace.
Las consecuencias de esta agresión militar fueron desastrosas desde el primer día. De hecho, 72 horas después, el secretario general adjunto informó a este órgano sobre el escenario humanitario de horror. Entre los cientos de miles de...
Okay, so yeah, this bit was a bit tricky. Okay, 72 horas después, but presumably 72 hours after the war started, I guess. Anyway, I just said 72 hours later. This is tricky if you don't happen to work in the UN. It's even, especially if you don't work even in New York. El Secretario General Adjunto is the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs. The USG. I think I called him the USG. And the Emergency Relief Coordinator. I think he just said the USG for Humanitarian Affairs, but he's also, that's his other sort of title, the Emergency Relief Coordinator. Informed this organ. You feel free to call the Security Council an organ, by the way, about the horrific humanitarian scenario.
Personas que querían huir de esta absurda agresión de Rusia estaban cerca de 1,000 ecuatorianos. Muchos de ellos debimos evacuar en el marco de operaciones de emergencia, de manera coordinada junto a otros países de Sudamérica como Colombia, Perú y México.
Okay, that sentence came off pretty well.
Muchos de esos ecuatorianos fueron para nosotros testimonio vivo de las graves consecuencias humanitarias de la invasión que se siguen deteriorando día tras día y minuto a minuto, incluso mientras debatimos en este momento.
One little thing I was going to say here is para testimonio vivo. I hesitated a moment. I was trying to think. I mean, I could have just said, like it is in the Spanish, live witnesses, but again, we don't really say that in English, do we? That's why I just hesitated for a second. I got it. Who are eyewitnesses of the grave humanitarian consequences of the invasion. So again, I just took that little moment just to think about it.
it wouldn't have been disaster if I'd said live witnesses, but you always want to sound, you want to try and sound like a natural English speaker, ideally.
Este no es un conflicto
This
que se
is
centra en
not a
Ucrania.
conflict just focused
Fue
on
un ataque
Ukraine. It was
al
an
mundo.
attack on the
Es una
world,
agresión
an
a América
aggression
Latina también.
on Latin America too.
Con 14 millones de
With
personas
14
forzadas a
million
salir
people
de sus
forced
hogares,
to leave their
8 millones
homes, 8
refugiadas en
million
Europa
refugees
y
in
casi
Europe,
6
and
millones de
almost
desplazados
6 million
internos. Las más
IDPs.
afectadas son
The
las
most
mujeres,
affected
las
are
niñas y
women
los niños.
and children. So those notes that I took when I was preparing really helped me here. I mean, okay, those figures in theory aren't that difficult to process. Got 14 million, 8 million, 6 million. But nevertheless, it was useful to have them written down. I had here, from the SG, it said 17.6 million for humanitarian assistance, or rather, okay, so he referred to 8 million refugees. The SG did, and then he referred to there being 5.4 million IDPs. So when I said 6 million IDPs and then looked at what I'd written in my notes, I knew it was pretty much the right figure. So yeah, those figures, if in those introductory statements, you keep your ear out for what you think might be important figures, and just having them written down in front of you, that can help you a lot.
La guerra tiene cerca de 18 millones de personas bajo necesidades de protección y asistencia. La destrucción de empleos y la
And sorry, this 18 million. So he'd said 17.6 million needing humanitarian assistance. So presumably that's the figure, the sort of ballpark figure he's referring to. I also just noticed here, I forgot to mention las niñas y los niños is a classic thing from Spanish. They always say girls and boys. And in English, you're perfectly entitled just to say children. So.
Devastación económica agravan esta tragedia inducida y ponen en situación de estrés a los mecanismos de protección de los derechos humanos. Las ejecuciones.
Yeah, this is an important word in these sort of things. Aggravans, I said compounded. I think I say it again later. It's always good to have a couple of alternatives for that. Compounded, exacerbated, and I guess you can say aggravated. And if nothing else comes to mind, have worsened. I don't know if this word here is esta tragedia inducida. I didn't render it. I just skipped it. I don't know if this induced tragedy. I don't think it really you lose much by just leaving that word out, to be honest. And I quite like how I sort of cope with ponen en situación de estrés. I said placed stress on the human rights protection mechanisms.
La violencia sexual y basada en el género, la tortura y otros tratos inhumanos y degradantes son parte de los ingredientes de crueldad de esta guerra. Hace un año.
Now, it really helps, for this sentence, it really helps if you work in the human rights treaty bodies in Geneva, because these are some of the key issues that those committees focus on. Summary execution, sexual, gender-based violence, I could have probably said GBV, torture, especially this, tratos inhumanos y degradantes, okay, cruel, inhumane, degrading treatment. That's one of the conventions, that's the Convention Against Torture, and cruel, inhumane, degrading treatment and punishment. That's the full name of that convention. And here I said, okay, son parte de los ingredientes. I said these are part and parcel of the cruelty of this war. I don't know, to me it just sounded natural to say that in English rather than saying these are part of the ingredients of the cruelty of this war. So you could have said ingredients. It just sounded to me it just sounded slightly nicer just to give it an English flavor, since we're talking about food. Part and parcel of the cruelty of this war.
Este consejo fue advertido de cuán brutal y prolongada podía ser la guerra urbana. Esa advertencia no fue suficiente para detener el uso de explosivos en zonas pobladas y los ataques dirigidos contra infraestructura crítica, energética, residencial, sanitaria, educativa y productiva, y contra el patromonio de la cultura e identidad de Ucrania, incluyendo museos y sitios religiosos. Este conflicto que está...
This little bit was a bit tricky. I didn't catch the urban. Okay. The council was warned of how brutal and prolongada, I guess the best word here would be protracted, would be like the gold medal solution. I just said how long, okay, how brutal, how long. I didn't catch urbana. I just said this war could be. I guess this urban war could be. Esa advertencia no fue suficiente. Notice, so here I just said this was insufficient. I didn't render the advertencia, this warning. Because I had said it here, okay, the council was warned, fue advertido. Then, okay, he repeats the idea of the advertencia, but again, it's intuit, you intuit that, okay, if you say this, referring back to the warning, this was not sufficient, it would make perfect sense in English to say that. Everyone would understand you, right? Zonas pobladas, populated areas, better than zones, okay, always lean, if you have a choice between areas and zones, areas is more likely to sound better in English. Attacks against, okay, I said vital infrastructure. I'd noticed in one of the warm-up statements, was it by SG or was it by China, they talked about vital infrastructure, but you could have said critical infrastructure. What threw me here is, of course, you have all these adjectives here referring back to the infrastructure. Okay, what he's actually saying is attacks against critical energy, residential, sanitary, educational, productive infrastructure. I leapt in immediately, right, with critical infrastructure, and then I had to sort of tweak it a bit as I was going along. I said residencial. I said against housing. I guess paraphrased slightly in that respect. And then what I said against educational facilities, medical facilities, for sanitaria educativa, patrimonio against the heritage. Okay, yeah, that was quite tricky, just because of the speed and the list of adjectives. So yeah, you have to just be wary of that, obviously, because you don't know going into English from Romance languages when the list of adjectives ends. Maybe a better way would have been to say against critical infrastructure, and then when I realized that the adjectives were continuing, I should have maybe just said, and against energy, residential, sanitary, educational infrastructure, and repeated it like I did before with, was it the consequences?
Infligiendo dolor y destrucción sobre el pueblo de Ucrania, exacerbó además la amenaza nuclear, agravó la inseguridad alimentaria global y afectó las economías, en particular de los países en desarrollo. Asimismo,
okay, so again, as exacerbó además, I said again, compounded. Here I said, this is a verb, an idea he's using quite a lot. Okay, aggravated global food insecurity. Afectó las economías. I kind of just said affected economies. I said impacted them. I think I'd seen that again in one of the previous statements, right? The idea of impacting economies.
Afectó la dinámica de trabajo de este Consejo y la confianza en el sistema de Naciones Unidas, lo que me lleva a mi segundo punto. En estos
Yeah, I said the dinámica de trabajo. I said the impetus of the work. Maybe I could have just said the dynamics of the work.
12 meses el sistema de Naciones Unidas se ha movilizado. El Consejo de Seguridad se ha reunido por lo menos 40 veces para considerar la situación en Ucrania, cuyo presidente incluso ha podido participar por medios telemáticos. Este Consejo, gracias.
I was quite pleased with myself por medios telemáticos. Maybe I've come across that before, but yeah, it just means that I think there was one session, or maybe more than one session, where he takes part via VTC. Maybe I could have said via VTC. That's another way I could have expressed that. I said remotely, which I think is fine.
El mecanismo Unión Pro Paz, con su resolución 2623, convocó al 11º periodo extraordinario de sesiones de emergencia de la Asamblea General, que adoptó 6 resoluciones centradas, entre otros, en la integridad territorial, la cuestión humanitaria, la rendición de cuentas, y la que acabamos de adoptar ayer con una votación abrumadora sobre los principios de la Carta de Naciones Unidas en los que se basa una paz general, justa y duradera. Por su parte, el pasado 10.
Okay, this was tough, right? That's a whole, from gracias down to, this is all one sentence, right? So there are a couple of things I missed. I missed this resolution. I might actually make a note of this resolution for when I do the Russian statement or the French statement. Okay, that That's the kind of resolution that might get mentioned again. 26, 23. So I think I just said here with the Union for Peace with the relevant resolutions. If you miss the resolution number, that's one way of sort of getting around it. You say with the corresponding, the relevant resolution. And then I managed to get this undécimo periodo, this 11th special session. They're called, the General Assembly holds, I think, special sessions. Let me check that. Okay, so this is important. It's a useful bit of in-house vocabulary. It's an emergency special session. So it's referring to this, the 11th emergency special session that was held on 27th of February 2022. I think I just said called it a special session, which wasn't a bad try. Maybe, yeah, okay, so it's an emergency special session. And then, okay, I got most of the resolution. I didn't get the humanitarian. That one slipped me by. But it was good. I'd made a note of this one. This was the resolution they'd adopted the day before, okay? ES 11/6. So I knew what they were talking. I knew what it was talking about, basically. And I said, con una votación abrumadora. Again, I just tweaked this slightly to make it sound more English. So if I was to do this, just processing word by word from Spanish, where we've just we adopted yesterday with an overwhelming vote. So somehow in English that doesn't feel like you'd say it that way. That we adopt it with an overwhelming vote. In English, you'd say we adopted it with an overwhelming majority. So that's why I said majority instead of vote. The principles of the charter that I think I said que se basa en los que se basa. It's good to know based on and underpin. They're good. That's a good pair of sort of synonyms to be able to work with, because you say, I don't know, the UN's work is based on the charter. The charter underpins the UN's work. You can sort of reverse it depending on which noun you say first. So that's good to have those two verbs remembered as a little package, based on and underpin.
16 de marzo de 2022, la Corte Internacional de Justicia ordenó a la Federación de Rusia suspender de inmediato sus operaciones militares y el secretario general ha sido clave por su actuación sobre la evacuación de civiles, liberación de prisioneros y otros asuntos humanitarios, incluyendo la iniciativa del grano del Mar Negro.
Black Sea Grain Initiative. Okay, I said here the International Court of Justice. In hindsight, I think I could have just called that the ICJ, right? I didn't. There's an acronym just hanging there to be taken that I should have done. But anyway, ordered the Russian Federation. Again, I called them the Federation here. I could have just said the ICJ ordered Russia. And you know what? So I gave it the date. I said the 16th of March, 2022. Under pressure, I think you could be forgiven for I could have just said, for its part, in March 2022, the ICJ ordered Russia to immediately suspend its military operations. So I didn't really take advantage of the shortcuts that were available there. And then, okay, this liberación de prisioneros. I think I said liberation, release. Prisoners tend to get released. Countries tend to get liberated. Prisoners tend to get released. And this, good job, I'd noticed this, and la iniciativa sobre la exportación de cereales. Again, maybe you can just see, I just read. Black Sea Grain Initiative, so yeah.
El Organismo Internacional de Energía Atómica también se encuentra desplegado en las centrales nucleares de Ucrania para reducir los riesgos existentes. Señor presidente,
and I was a bit under pressure here. Now, as soon as I heard El Organismo Internacional, again, a bit of in-house knowledge helps here. So I knew that this is going to now move on to the nuclear stuff. He's going to talk about this is the IAEA. So I don't know why in Spanish you call it El Organismo. I don't know why you can't call it La Agencia. But I don't know what you Spanish speakers have against the word agencia. But anyway, so I knew it was going to be the IAEA. Gave it the acronym there, and they deployed out to the nuclear reactors. And I think I'd noted that down. Had I noted that down? I think I said para reducir los riesgos existentes. They say, I think, mitigate existing risks, which is a nice solution. I could have said reduce, but mitigate sounds a bit nicer.
Como expuesto, Naciones Unidas está movilizada, pero nada, ningún esfuerzo será suficiente ante el dolor de miles de padres o madres que siguen enterrando a sus hijos y el drama de esos miles de niños y niñas huérfanos. ¿Cómo justificamos ante esa generación del pueblo de Ucrania que un día se despertó bajo el asedio de las bombas, los misiles y la pólvora para no ver más a sus seres queridos porque unos murieron y otros huyeron? ¿Cuántos horrores más?
This is a tough paragraph, okay. As I said, the UN has mobilized nothing, no effort will be sufficient. I said, given the pain of, thousands of mothers and fathers who continue to bury their children. El drama, so I said the tragedy, I think drama is a bit stronger than the English word drama. Spanish native speakers may correct me on this, but I thought it was a bit, the tragedy I thought was a more appropriate word in English, of those thousands of niños y niñas huérfanos. I just said orphans. And then again, this is a very tricky rhetorical question. How can we justify ourselves, how can we justify ourselves to this generation of the people of Ukraine who one day woke up to I said the sound of bombs, missiles, and dust? I mean, literally, el asedio is a siege, isn't it? I think that's what maybe threw me. In English, you wouldn't say the siege of bombs, missiles, and in English, that's maybe why I said sound. I think we woke up to the sound. Maybe the onslaught of bombs, missiles, and dust. Not dust, is it? No, I knew pulver. I wasn't certain. Yeah, gunpowder. I should have known that. I said dust. Powder. Yeah. Gunpowder. Never to see the loved ones again. Some died. If you want a better word than just died, okay, those have perished. So it has a stronger feel to it. Others fled.
Deben pasar para que termine esta absurda guerra. ¿Cuántas sesiones más de este Consejo hacen falta para detener la agresión militar contra Ucrania? Esto me lleva a
that was pretty good.
Mi tercer y último punto sobre lo que todavía podemos y debemos hacer. Primero, el Consejo debe rechazar.
Yeah, so I sort of corrected myself there. It should be just on what we can and should do. So I'd started going. I sort of there I did correct myself, and it was pretty obvious I corrected myself. So that was a slight black mark there.
Sin ambigüedades, los intentos de anexión de territorios basados en la fuerza y la violencia como herramienta de dominación entre los estados. Esta no es.
Reject sin ambigüedad. Okay, that's good to have a couple of solutions for this. I said categorically. We must reject categorically or unambiguously. Okay, it's good. Just remember those two as a little package of synonyms. Attempts to annex territories based on force, violence as a herramienta de dominar. I said an instrument, or you could have said a tool of domination among states.
Una visión de Occidente, como se escucha una y otra vez. Este es un principio sagrado para los países en desarrollo, cuyo único arsenal es el derecho internacional y sus municiones son los dispositivos de la Carta. Segundo, debe terminar.
Okay, I was quite pleased that I got this bit. Yeah, who's como se escucha, we hear time and again. Sometimes in going into English, obviously escuchar, we tend to, the sort of the solution is to listen, but sometimes in Spanish it's more appropriate to render it with to hear, like here, which we hear time and again. So just be aware of that sometimes you can render escuchar as hear. Their only arsenal is international law, and their only munitions are the dispositivos de la carta. The word almost threw me, because sometimes dispositivo, I think, can be like to do with an explosive device, and that's where I thought it was going to go, because he's talking about arsenal, municiones, and then when I heard de la carta, okay, then it sort of dawned on me, oh, okay, he's talking about dispositivos as in the provisions.
Inmediatamente el abuso y la aplicación parcial del artículo 27.3 de la Carta, por la cual la parte en una controversia debe abstenerse de votar. Tercero, los miembros del Consejo.
This is a tough paragraph. This threw me a bit. So I missed the article. I just missed the article, the paragraph. I said, I think they said the relevant provision of the Charter. So we must put an immediate end to the abuse and partial application of Article 27, Paragraph 3 of the Charter. And I got this bit here, whereby a party to a dispute should abstain from a vote. So I'm not quite certain of the background to this. Okay, so here's the Charter, in fact, Article 27. This might be useful going forward when we come to doing the other statements. Decisions of the Security Council and all other matters shall be made by an affirmative vote of 9 members, including the concurring votes of the permanent members, provided that in decisions under Chapter 6 and under Paragraph 3 of Article 52, a party to a dispute shall abstain from voting. Okay, so this is presumably a sort of hint saying that the Russians should abstain from votes on issues to do with the Ukraine because they are a party to that dispute, so they shouldn't be voting. I guess that is what the Ecuadorians are intimating here. So I haven't. Because I don't work in New York, I don't do all the meetings there, so this is the first time that I've heard about this, but I would presume that is what the reference is to.
De manera colectiva o individual debemos redoblar nuestro apoyo para los esfuerzos y buenos oficios del Secretario General, así como para las labores interagenciales. Cuarto,
okay, the good offices of the Secretary General, that's that's something I'll often refer to, the good offices. Okay, here I said that the SG.
¿Qué mejor manera de honrar la vida de las víctimas de este conflicto que asegurando los mecanismos de investigación independientes, la rendición de cuentas y la reparación como herramientas de resarcimiento, pero también de disuasión? Y finalmente, lo más importante.
Okay, resarcimiento. That was a word that threw me. I think I came across this word not so long ago, and I did make a note of it, and I couldn't quite remember. Is it to do with, I said compensation here, but I think let's see. Yeah, compensation. Well, there you go. I was right. Indemnification, indemnity. So that was a good educated guess in that case. So, but yeah, you do come across that word. So non-Spanish natives do make a note of that, resarcimiento, for compensation. Independent investigation mechanism, rendición de cuentas, accountability, and again, dissuasion, deterrence. Okay, I know there is such a thing as dissuasion, but that sounds a bit ugly in English. So, yeah, deterrence. Very important, the whole idea of nuclear deterrence.
La Federación de Rusia debe poner fin de inmediato a la guerra no provocada e injustificable, retirando sus tropas de ocupación para permitir un alto al fuego realista encaminado al restablecimiento de la paz y la seguridad en Ucrania, fundamentadas en el respeto a su soberanía, integridad territorial e independencia política. Hoy, por todos los niños y niñas.
Yeah, so here, again, I'll keep on the Russian Federation. So, again, I don't think I need to. I think Russia would have been fine. Should put an immediate end to its unprovoked, unjustifiable war. This is a sort of package that's used all the time, right, when they refer to the war in Ukraine. Is it brutal? They usually say that brutal, unprovoked, unjustified war. Withdrawing its occupying troops to el alto de fuego realista said a genuine ceasefire, realistic ceasefire. Genuine sounds better. I just fundamentadas en el respeto. I skipped that. I just said based on its sovereignty and territorial integrity and political independence. Maybe based on respect for its sovereignty. It should have been. Again, not a disastrous omission.
Que murieron y los heridos y por los que viven todavía bajo el espectro de las bombas, hacemos un llamado para que esta guerra no dure un día más. Muchas gracias.
To ensure that this war doesn't last a day longer. They always say that the most important parts of a statement are the opening and the ending, and I was desperately trying to just work out how to make that ending sound good, and I got there. I made a coherent sentence in the end. Maybe it could have sounded better. Today, for all the children who have died and los heridos, the injured or wounded, those who still live under the spectre of bombs, hacemos un llamado para que esta guerra no dure un día más. We call. It's sometimes, it's a bit tricky putting the Spanish wording exactly into English. We make a call for this war not to last a day longer. Yeah, maybe that would have sounded better. But yes, we call on you to ensure that this war does not last a day longer. But yeah, try and. It's always good to try and end on a high note, even if all the rest in the middle has been rubbish. You want to. That's one thing. Also, if you get a statement right, if you have time to prepare it, but you're pushed for time, and you can see, oh God, I'm not going to be able to get through all this before the actual speaker starts speaking. One thing I'll do if I know that's going to happen is, okay, I'll prepare the start, and then I'll prepare the first couple of paragraphs, and I'll immediately go to the end to try and prepare the last couple of paragraphs. Okay, and then if I've still got time, go back to the middle of it. But again, that's another little tip for you. Okay, well, that was my attempt at Ecuador then in the Security Council. I think overall, pretty pleased with my performance there. Learned a few new words. Resarcimiento is a good one. Pólvora, gunpowder is a good one to know, especially in these circumstances. This is an interesting bit of, as I say, in-house security technicality, technicality, but the reference to this article, I suspect that it's not just the Ecuadorian. I doubt they were the first to point to this situation under Article 27, Paragraph 3, so that's a good one to know. What other useful vocab was that? Mainly, it was stuff I'd all come across before. It's good to just remind myself a bit of the Security Council lingo, internal lingo, emergency relief coordinator. Like a cruel, inhumane, degrading treatment. That's a package that you really want to be comfortable with. Por medios telemáticos. That's you want to just remember that's the way the Spanish sort of have of saying. Via remote, via VTC. Sin ambigüedades, remember, categorical and unambiguously. Okay, so I hope you've learnt some new words there. I hope you've learnt a few new little techniques, maybe from my self-evaluation there. And if any auditors have bothered to watch this video all the way through to the end, hi guys, hope you enjoyed that. And all that remains to be said, we'll be doing another episode taking the Russian and also maybe the French, by the way. So you've got that to look forward to. All that remains to be said, though, is that episode 169 of the Interpretation Station stands adjourned.